So when you guys saw all of these acronyms in the program or up on the board here, did you think, oh my God, this is going to be boring? Well, I certainly did. So let me just start off by kind of setting the stage here. Okay? So we all know that attacks are coming at us from everywhere, from all different places. You see it in the news. And the bad news is it's not getting any better. And it's not just the proverbial person in their basement. It's organized crime. It's nation states. It's people with a lot of resources. Just to kind of set the stage, it's estimated that the market for cyber crime, so this is the amount of money the bad guys are making, is about $3 trillion a year. Whereas if you were to put the market for cybersecurity, the stuff that Cisco sells, the stuff that all these people with these booths out here sell, that's $106 billion a year. So that's just kind of gives you a scale of why this is happening. Now, as part of that, the market has responded, and you may have seen this slide in other presentations, but these are just some of the vendors that are out there that are trying to help our customers fix this problem. And so when you take the scale of the threats and the amount of capability that's out there, as well as just the confusion, what it really becomes is it's just too hard. It's impossibly complex. And so what has happened is kind of expected, just like, maybe some things that are otherwise expected. Just driving through San Diego and in almost any town in Southern California, you see a lot of these scooters. And we really should have known that as the scooter use goes up, so do the injuries. And we probably should have also known that half of those are going to be from drunk or high riders. So, just these things that you should have known. And so it makes sense that when you have all of these threats coming at us and you have all of these solutions, how do you make sense of it? And so what has happened is this proliferation of initials that stand for things. So there's the Zero Trust, which is ZT or ZTX. There's PCI, processing card industry. And I'm not going to go into that today. There's the Nist Cybersecurity Framework and the Nist Risk Management Framework. CARTA Gartner didn't want to be outdone by Forrester, so they came out with their CARTA. So all of these initials. And that brings me to kind of the initials that probably all of us are thinking is OMG. What are all these? How do I use them? And why do they matter? Okay? So what I'd like to do this morning is kind of talk about why they matter. I've kind of set the stage a little bit. I'm going to go into most of them and give you a flavor for what each of them are, just one slide each. And then I'm going to talk about an approach where you can pick your flavor and be able to meet it. Okay? But the premise of my whole presentation is that if you have an open, scalable, and automated foundation, then you can meet any of these. And not only that, you can meet the business needs of your organization and be more efficient doing it. And the whole idea is to go from where most of us are in the industry, which is overwhelmed, to the place where we're empowered. Okay. So let's start out with Zero Trust. Zero Trust was started about 4 years ago in a committee. It was taken and popularized by Forrester, and it's become a major buzzword in the industry. It's built on what was 9 pillars, now it's 7 pillars. So if you look at the little diagram at the bottom, you only see 4 pillars. But at the bottom, you see visibility and analytics and automation and orchestration as the foundation. Forrester calls that those pillars, and at the top is data, and Forrester calls that a pillar also. So when you add the 4 plus the 3, you get to the 7. Now the whole idea behind zero trust is that you trust nothing until they're verified. It's the old adage of least privilege taken to a higher degree. And that means that you look at all of the things on your network, your people, your devices, your network, your workloads, your data, and you trust none of it. All data is encrypted, and once you establish that, it's not automatically trust, it's earned trust. So once you establish that something is trustworthy, then you allow it into the particular places of your network where it should be able to go. Now, Forrester has then taken their basic ZT, Zero Trust, and put it into ZTX, which is Zero Trust Extended. And that includes a lot of things like automation and visibility. Okay, so when you hear someone talk about Zero Trust, I think the easiest way to think about it is if everything in your network was exposed to the internet, how would you protect it? And the way you protect it is you verify the credentials and the trust of every transaction. And that gets you to zero trust. Okay? Now the next step of that was BeyondCorp, which is part of Google. And they implemented a zero trust. And as you would expect, it has a very strong cloud-based bias in this BeyondCorp framework. But really what it is, it's a systematic way to implement zero trust, which they did, and that they're hoping people will follow their process. Where what you do, the first thing you do, and I think if anybody was implementing zero trust, they would do the same thing. They would first identify every device and process and activity on their network, and then you create identities for each. And then once you do that, then you remove the trust from the network and make each of these devices or people or data earn that trust again, and then they have access. And so that's kind of the easy way of looking at this BeyondCorp model. Okay? And I want to emphasize that it's an example and it can be used as a guide. This is no certification or anything like that. Okay? Now moving on to CARTA. Gartner didn't want to be outdone by Forrester because Forrester's out making a lot of money selling this whole idea of zero trust. So they took it one step further and they added threat protection into the trusted organization. And are you guys familiar with a vicious cycle? So a vicious cycle is, you do one thing and it makes it worse here and it worse there and worse there. Well, what we see in cybersecurity an awful lot is a virtuous cycle. And it almost always, whenever you see a process flow that goes in one of these circles that says first you analyze what you need, then you implement it, then you operate it, then you look at it again and decide what else you need, and then you implement that, and that's what a virtuous cycle is. And Gartner took this virtuous cycle and put it into this process. So for threat protection and for access protection, and you'll see on the outside here, access protection is the green circle, and the blue circle is threat protection. And they look at it as implement, operate, analyze, adjust. It's one of those circles. Okay? And of course, when you do that, the emphasis is on continuous improvement. So again, not a checklist. This is something that you can use as a guide, and it can help you implement in a more efficient way. Next, we have the Nist Cybersecurity Framework. Are people in the room familiar with Nist CSF? Okay. I'm a big proponent of the Nist Cybersecurity Framework. I do other presentations where I teach people how to use it, so let me just say that I have a bias for it out front. And really what the Nist Cybersecurity Framework allows you to do is to prioritize what you want to do. It allows you then to grade your own organization on your progress toward that. And then it allows you to come up with a plan based on your priorities and risk management in order to move forward. Okay, so that's kind of the stated goals. Some of the good things that come out of it is that once you have done this, you have a good idea of where you are lacking. And you can use it then to determine this is where I'm lacking for the Nist Cybersecurity Framework. This is where I need to invest maybe, because I made this risk-based decision. And this is how I justify it to my management or to whoever is approving budget. And then once you have done that and you followed the Nist Cybersecurity Framework, it has become a kind of a de facto standard both in the insurance business and in industry and in court. So it's becoming a place where if you follow the Nist Cybersecurity Framework and if something happens and you can justify that you made the proper risk-based decisions, that it helps protect you. Okay? So this is why I like the Nist Cybersecurity Framework. The other thing that I like about it is that it's a common language that everybody can use. Okay? And again, it was not designed as a checklist. It was designed as a guide. And it was designed originally for the IoT business or the Internet of Things business, or what was created originally called critical infrastructure. But it's been being used everywhere throughout the industry, and I'm really seeing it take off. The other thing about it, and this is a little weird from a guy from Cisco to be standing up here talking about it, is it's not just products, it's not just technology, it's about people, process, policy, and technology. And in fact, Cisco meets about a third of the requirements, even though we have a very robust cybersecurity offering. Okay. Now, part of the Nist Cybersecurity Framework is that it offers helpful references. And when you get to those helpful references, most of them go back to the Nist Cybersecurity Risk Management Framework, or RMF. And the RMF is a little bit more of a checklist. It's a much longer document. It's a 300-page document. Do not read that document. Do not. Use it as a reference. Okay? So if you're back in the Nist Cybersecurity Framework and you're in Identify, and the first category of Identify is IDAM, Asset Management. And then IDAM has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are subcategories. And then right after that, it has helpful references. And most of the helpful references come right back to this NIST 800-53. But if you really want to go through a process and this virtuous cycle again of categorize, select, implement, access, authorize, and monitor, then you can use the NIST risk management framework as part of that. So that's where that's where that fits in. Okay? So it's still flexible, but it's more of a checklist. Okay. So what other frameworks are you guys hearing about, or best practice? You know, I don't know what to call this group of acronyms, but I call them framework or best practices. Are there other ones that you guys are running into? Oh, come on.
ISO 2700.
Oh, I don't have that one. Damn. Yeah, pick that. Well, okay, so you probably weren't thinking of DoD RMF, right? But this is an implementation of the NIST Risk Management Framework that DoD did, Department of Defense. And their goal was to implement in a workable way how to do that. And they use the 800 series documents, and you'll notice that they have this virtuous circle again, and it very closely follows the Nist RMF. But they had other goals in mind. And one of the main goals they had was that they wanted to get away from checklists and empower their managers to make risk-based decisions. Okay? So that was a huge thing about it. And then the other thing they wanted to do was have reciprocal acceptance of documents. So before, when you wanted to do something new on a DoD network, it had to go to a lab down in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and they would bless it in something called a STIG. And one of the goals of this, and I can't remember what STIG stands for. It was
Technical Implementation Guide.
Security Technical Implementation Guide. And actually, I have that written in my notes because I knew I'd forget it. But they want to get, one of the goals in the letter that the DoD secretary sent out was, we want to get away from STIGs and go to DoD RMF. Okay, so it's this whole idea of making risk-based decisions. Okay, another thing going on in federal is something called CDM, for Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation. And they've done this in 4 phases. It started off with network access, and now they're up to continuous network monitoring. And this really is a federal requirement. It's a checklist, but it also, they offer a lot of risk management to the agencies. And the big thing that they do is they say that every department has to report up to a dashboard in the agency, which then reports up to a dashboard at Office of Management and Budget, so that the upper managers can see what's going on with each organization in federal. Okay? So, why am I telling a bunch of Southern California state and local people about federal? Well, you're probably facing a lot of the same issues. Okay? And one of those issues that is federal that you may be facing is CJIS. Criminal Justice Information System. And if your county or town has access to the Criminal Justice Information System, you have requirements placed on you by the FBI. This is definitely a checklist. Okay? And they have recently added 20 new auditors to their staff, so oftentimes we hear about it when an auditor comes along, and then they call, hey, Cisco, can you help us? And we come in and help. But we prefer to do it sooner. Most of it is based on Nist CSF, Risk Management Framework, and particularly 800-53, special publication. Okay? But if you don't meet the CJIS requirements, you can not only lose access to the Criminal Justice Information System, you can also lose access to federal funding for your locality. So it does, in some cases, these initials do make a huge difference, and it's not just a suggestion. Okay? So let's talk about what they have in common. And I'm going to go through each of these, but I think in the previous discussion, I talked about risk management a lot, and it's not just about checking boxes. They also talk about intelligence and knowing what's going on in a network, what devices, people, process are all on the network. That's intelligence. That's also visibility, being able to see what's going on in a network. From CARTA on down, they talk about defenses. Zero Trust doesn't really, kind of ignores that. And then, it's inevitable that there are scorecards in some of these. But really what the goal of all of these is a secure environment and protected data. So with risk management, the main thing that I want to say about that is that you could throw 3 times your budget at protecting your data and your network, and you probably still wouldn't be completely secure. And in fact, it's definite, you wouldn't be completely secure. So you have to make appropriate decisions based on your risk tolerance, on your environment, and on your budget as to what you're going to spend. And I think that all of these best practices help you do that. They also help you justify it. So it's not, I love the joke about the security officers in an organization, and their boss comes to them and says, "Are we secure?" And the answer is, if you want to get fired today, say no. And if you want to get fired at the first breach, say yes. Right? So that's the wrong question. The question is, have we made the right risk-based decisions for our organization? And can we justify them? And can we say that we feel that we've done the best we can with the resources we have? And so that's where all of these best practices focus on making risk-based decisions. They also talk about intelligence. And this is threat intelligence. This is intelligence of what's going on in my own environment. And the whole idea of automating as much as you can as far as updating based on this intelligence, and automating the response. And we even take that to the extent of doing proactive threat hunting, where the idea is if you see things globally, you can protect locally. Now, I was sitting in the large presentation at the beginning of the day, and they talked about the dwell time right now for threats being about 100 days, and wouldn't it be great if we could get to 10 days, and wouldn't it be great if we could get to 1? Well, I got to tell you, that's not that great. At Cisco, we're at 3.6 hours from the place we see a threat, the first place in the world, on average, to where we protect all of our customers. 3.6 hours is where we are right now in our mean time to detection. Okay, so 1 day is not good enough. Okay, next, visibility. Okay, identifying what's on your network, all of the people that are on your network, all of the processes running on your network, all of the applications, all of the devices. Everything needs to be identified and monitored. And this is not just at your little environment inside your firewall. It's where your users are and where your data is going. So it's from the endpoint to the data center to the cloud. You need to be able to see it. When you can see, you can stop things quicker. And you can see abnormalities like address encryption. You want to include context in what you're seeing, and I'll go into some of this. But it's not just the flows in and out of your data center, but it's the flows in your data center amongst resources. So that's all important. Okay, and then there's a lot of information on protecting against threats. I broke it into 4 categories of identity, so being able to enforce identity, and it really should be able to be enforced down to the device, not to the VLAN. So, if you can identify down to level 2 and enforce access management to level 2, that's where you want to be. With threat detection, you want to be able to continually look for threats. You want to have good malware defense. You need to make sure that your data is kept safe. And it really needs to be anytime, anywhere. Okay, so these are all the things that are addressed in these different frameworks. We're past segmentation now, and everybody's talking about microsegmentation. And microsegmentation gets down to the idea of allowing people to the right resources based not only upon who they are and their password, but who they are, what time of day it is, where they're coming from, how they're connected. All of those things go into a trust-based decision, and we talk about that. And then you'll probably hear this everywhere. As part of this overload of threats and overload of devices, the only way we're going to stay ahead of threats is to automate. And that means that the root things that right now level 1 analysts have to do need to be automated. And they need to happen at machine speed, not at, oh, I found something and I'm going to go look at syslogs and see what happened. It needs to be automatic. And it needs to be enforced, wherever that threat may go. So that's kind of the threat that you're seeing that's common in all of these. And then I've just listed a bunch of the different compliance things. If you are taking credit cards anywhere in your organization, you're required PHI. If you have any medical data on any patients, you have HIPAA, Health Care Portability and Protection Act, I think. So there are all of these. Okay? So that's kind of what they have in common. And again, we get back to all of these initials that mean something. And hopefully you're saying, okay, now I understand where they come from. I understand what they have in common. But how do I meet these? Okay? And what we're saying, and that you're starting to see, is that you need good products. But even more important, you need them in an integrated environment. So when we start looking at all of the different devices that may be on your network, you know, your next generation firewall or next generation intrusion prevention system, and maybe your email security and your network behavior monitoring product, it's all great, and you know, all these things are nice to have, but when you have all of them, they get really hard to manage, and you have to have people that know how to interact with them, and as soon as you train your people to interact with your next generation firewall, they get hired by the company down the street. So it's really important that these things are integrated and automated just to help. And there's a lot of data that can be shared amongst them. So it's not just that you have these things talking together, but they're sharing context. So if my web security device says the reputation of this sender is bad, it then looks at the file and it sends it to my advanced malware device that says, here's what this file looks like coming from that bad organization. I think you need to look at it in more depth. And then that device says, oh yeah, here's a bad file and it came from this location and it came from, you know, it's this size, and I'll share that with all the other devices on the network. So then you start seeing that happen. And then your access and identity management says, well, this particular endpoint has this bad file on it. I'm going to quarantine that until it's fixed automatically. And once it's fixed, I'll let it back on the network and back to all of the things that it should have access to automatically. So that's the kind of things that automation can buy you. Okay? And what it looks like in an architecture is that you have to have a ubiquitous system from your endpoint into your network, into your cloud, and including all of your applications. And be able to enforce everywhere. Now, when you start talking about zero trust and CARTA and all of these, they all talk about continuous trust. So you have to have continuous verification of who's getting to what and what machines are getting to what. So every asset on your network, whether it be a person or machine, also needs to be continuously trusted. And then you need threat feeds. So you need to know what you're looking for. And then you need a process to manage it. So it seems really simple and really easy to do. So everybody go out and do it tomorrow and we'll be all done. Right? So it's not that easy. And then there's also feeds from other places. And we're really big in our company about talking about open APIs and open systems so that we can bring in data we know that people aren't going to have a whole Cisco environment, and so we're very big on incorporating products that aren't from us. Okay, and I really want to emphasize this fact that you need this continuous threat detection as well as continuous trust verification. So it's not one and done. It's continuous, and it's threat and identity. And that's really the thing that zero trust miss. And when you start talking about this microsegmentation that's so important, you really need the visibility so that you can see what's going on. You need to be able to dynamically control it. And if you can do this automatically and dynamically, you're much more secure. And then it has to be orchestrated so that all this automation stuff works. Okay? So, I've told you you need to take into account these best practices. It's best to start with a good network platform that is flexible and scalable. We actually had hired Forrester to do a study that showed that if you are able to implement this an architectural approach to security, that the cost savings are about 38%. And you're also able to have a more flexible environment so that you can implement new applications to make your business owners happy. So the line of business people that want a new application, you're able to do that faster. Okay? So some of the key security factors that the customers I talk to want is performance, scale, and accurate security. And getting performance at scale means all of these things. So again, back to the whole idea of having a scalable, flexible network with software-defined networking, with all of the different things that you can bring to automate. And then using what you have as a sensor for security. So use your switches, use your routers, use all of the devices as sensors. And then, of course, the benefit is that you get this performance, scale, and security. You get network and tool consolidation, so it's easier to manage. And the big thing is you're saving money, you're saving time, and you're protecting your network. Okay. So there's this kind of a journey to this where you have maybe a digital ready infrastructure, then you start looking at policy automation, analytics insurance, and then machine learning and AI. Who knows the difference between machine learning and AI?
One exists and one doesn't.
Right. AI will never be available in my lifetime.
There you go.
Yeah, is the answer. But that's the big words in security right now. I think everybody's using some form of machine learning. I really have not seen a whole lot of AI. And then this whole idea where the network is able to give you suggestions and help you do your security based on intent. And one of the buzzwords that we like to use is network as sensor, network as enforcer. So use what you have. And then the next question is, with an integrated security approach, we really do want to take ourselves from this overwhelm to empowered. And again, if you have a scalable, open, and automated foundation, then what you do is you go and apply the best practices that we talked about. So once I have this foundation and I have good security, then I go and I say, okay, zero trust. Let me take a zero trust attitude or mindset to my implementation. And that means that I take more of a look at disallowing access until I have good trust. Well, that fits almost all of them. Okay? And kind of the pathway, and this is a new slide that I'm trying out on you guys that we've developed. And we're seeing this in a lot of customers, in that up in the middle there's all these different mandates and requirements, and then the threat landscape that's constantly changing. So those are the external factors that are operating on us when we talk. Then what we have right now in most organizations is a security organization and a network organization. And I'm actually starting to see a lot of organizations bring those two groups together, so that when something is done to the network, it's more intrinsically taken to that there are security built in. And it takes it so that the security people are not the group of no that just says, no, you can't do this on my network because it's not safe. They become more of a organization that says, yes, I want to implement this, but we have to take these securities into concern. Or even better, our network is secure enough that we can do this, and and we're ready to go, which is where every organization wants to get. So, you know, you take those and put them together, and you don't throw away what you have. You bridge. You add the components that you need and depend on the fact and require that they work together, and then just put them all in, with the end goal being an open, integrated, and automated both network and security posture. Okay? So that's kind of the goal of all this. And then a lot of people ask me, where do I start? And it's, you know, you can take this nice chart and follow it, but some of the quick and dirty steps that I've learned is the first thing you got to do is you got to know what you have. And you need a good way of getting an inventory. I hate to say this, but reduce the number of vendors. I love it because, I love saying it because I hope that we'll be one of them, but that's up to you. We really can't emphasize enough this idea of micro-segmentation down to level 2. Then take a look at what requirements you have and make sure that you meet them. And of course, know your risk. Okay? So hopefully with that, you see that we are trying to take you from this overwhelmed to empowered state. Now, we did look at a lot of these framework, and we mapped our products to them. So for Zero Trust, ZTX, and CARTA, we took some of our products and said, here's how they help meet that. We also did that with the federal CDMs, and this one we say partially meet and mostly meet their requirements. Here's for Nist Cybersecurity Framework. So you'll notice that the green is where Cisco has a product to help, and that only about a third of it is product. So that's the whole idea of people, process, and policy is very big there. NIST 800-53 we did. NIST 800-171. I didn't mention that one. Do people know what 171 is? It's the data privacy that if you handle personal information and get federal funding, they make you meet 800-171. So it's for confidential, unclassified data is the what it's called. And then CJIS is another one. And by the way, I will share all of these slides with the organizers, and it'll be available on the website. Or if you give me a card, I'll email it to you. And then, of course, we get back to the critical 20. So we went ahead and mapped them all. I really encourage you guys to not build your security based on these best practices, but to build very good security with an adaptable architecture, and then go and say, here's how I meet these. Okay. So that's my main message, and I'm open to questions if anybody has any. Okay, and I'll hang out here for a little while if anybody wants to chat afterwards. So thank you very much.